Every morning I wake up to a big blue Alberta flag that flies proudly in front of our house. It flies with pride because to my family, it is a visible symbol of our history and our potential, of our sense of place, and of our understanding of who we are as a people. Every morning I also wake up with the responsibility for my two sons, Evan and Michael, fourth-generation Albertans, who hopefully embrace the same history and values of those who helped build this province, and maybe one day they can contribute this great history that is all of ours. And what an incredible history it is. A history of boom over bust, a history of triumph over hardship, a history of finding opportunity amidst adversity, and a history of generating social and economic prosperity that others could only dream to achieve. A history that started thousands of years ago on this particular bend, on this particular river, where people came to trade, to learn, to celebrate, and to heal. A place of beauty, as portrayed on our flag, where the land provides abundance, the soil provides sustenance, the mountains provide permanence, and the blue skies forever provide unlimited imagination. A place of richness where people come in search of opportunity and find it through the important combination of hard work, determination, and courage. A place of ruggedness and resilience that has tested generations of Albertans through drought, floods, tornadoes, bad hockey teams, and no shortage of cold, dark nights. A place where neighbors help neighbors, no matter how far it is to walk, because there isn't an expectation or an entitlement of relying on anyone other than ourselves. And a place where compassion goes hand in hand with wealth creation, knowing that when the two are in sync, there is no better place. These are the stories of our province and of our city. These are the stories of the McTaggarts and the Pools, and of the Nakvis and the Guptas, the Zestchuks and the Mazukas, the Shockters and the Spinellis. These describe our history and values, and they describe us as a people. These are the stories that remind us that it is what you are doing in a down cycle that determines your readiness when the market goes back. And these are the stories that need to be present in our hearts and minds as we move forward and as we find ourselves surrounded by a very distorted world. The world around us has lost its compass. The current economic environment, which I believe will persist for a considerable period of time, is in total disarray. There has been no period in modern history when all at the same time debt levels have been so high, technology change has been so rapid, geopolitical tensions so extreme, energy prices so volatile, and interest rates for so low for so long. The result will be one of the most challenging eras through which our business, community, and political leaders must navigate, as the weight of gravity is against us at this point in time. Many of you won't like what I have to say today. I don't like what I have to say today. But we cannot let political correctness and artificial sunshine get in our way of coming together as a community, getting to work, and turning our economic future around. And make no mistake about it, we can turn it around. Globally, there are 5 key drivers of gravity that are putting an unusual amount of weight on us. I usually rely on Deloitte for these kind of thought leaderships, but this is my summary. Global debt has accelerated to a point where it is far too extreme. For the past decade, the entire world has tried to stimulate growth through monetary policy, which hasn't worked. In fact, it's been toxic to governments, to businesses, and to citizens. The idea of using debt to stimulate growth has been incredibly addictive for policymakers, but every time it is the citizens who end up paying the price, while governments just simply get bigger and bigger. global growth has stalled. Europe, Japan are flat. Emerging markets, which accounted for most of the global growth over the past decade, have spiraled down, led by an economic meltdown in China, Brazil, who is essentially bankrupt, and Russia, who is spending 32% of their GDP on military. And now the United States is stalling rather rapidly, with recession lingering once again for the year ahead. Global growth for 2016 was projected at the beginning of September to be 3.3%. At the beginning of November, it was 3.1%, and now in January, it's projected to be 2.8%, and the year is just starting. Commodity prices continue to decline. When global growth stalls, demand for commodities grinds to a halt, as shown by the Baltic Dry Index for shipping global trade, which has collapsed to a record low. That is going to have significant impact on asset and equity values in the coming year, punctuated by the fact that we just lost $2.5 trillion in market capitalization in the first 5 days of trading this year. Energy supply seems limitless. Last year, global oil production increased 2.1% to 97 million barrels per day. Demand only increased 1.8% to 95 million barrels a day, and the price plummeted. Going into this year, OPEC has lifted the ceiling on their production, creating an every member for themselves free-for-all. Then, last week, Saudi Arabia again contemplated an IPO for Aramco, valued at $1 trillion to ensure it can continue to defend market share. The United States lifted a 40-year-old ban and will continue to push production and allow for more exports. And meanwhile, there's 4 million barrels a day of new production is expected to come on board from countries like Iran and Libya, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE, all at a time where demand is expected to slow, and that before we're even starting to talk about recession. The consequences will continue to be felt by everyone. This morning by Nigeria, but specifically by high marginal cost producers, countries like Venezuela and of course Canada. And our currency will continue to suffer. Our oil price is going to come back, not without help from the one thing that has been consistent throughout history, and that is geopolitical instability. Mr. Putin clearly outmaneuvered the West in the Ukraine and has again in Syria, and is now working closely with China, Iran, and other Eurasian Economic Union regimes to shift the balance of power. It would not be unreasonable to expect a further push of ambition in the final year of this presidency. Folks, we live in an incredibly volatile and high anxiety time, not just here, but right around the world. Nationally, we seem remarkably naive. And I'm not talking about foreign policy, rather remarkably naive about our own economy and our addiction to debt. We have the second largest land mass in the world and a population of only 36 million people. We're an exporting nation, period. Which means we have to produce and we have to move our products to market cheaper than others can get it elsewhere. And we're simply not doing that. Over 60% of our exports come from Ontario and Alberta, our manufacturing sector and our resource sector. And both provinces are on a slippery slope, which is jeopardizing the long-term competitiveness of both these sectors and our country. Like Alberta, Ontario's largest export customer across the border has become its competitor, as the US has been investing in research, technology, and manufacturing capacity at 6 times the rate of Canada for more than a decade. And over that decade of decline, the Ontario government has become the largest subnational debtor in the world, with provincial debt that grew 80% over the last 10 years to $294 billion. Net debt to GDP increased 48% over the same period. Equalization payments to them increased 88% over the past decade, resulting in provincial debt now at over $21,000 per person in Ontario, and annual interest payments on that debt costing every person $840 a year. Based on our provincial budget, Alberta is on track to reach half of these per-person levels in only 4 years. And with a lack of revenue plan, that is gravely concerning to me, as it should be to you. The drug The heroin in our society is called cheap debt or perceived cheap debt, given our low interest rate environment. And I experimented a lot with this drug in university, using credit cards to buy beer and student loans to pay off credit cards. It was awesome, and I was wickedly popular. Until I graduated and realized that my income wasn't quite enough to cover even an Ichiban noodle lifestyle. All I can say is I'm glad I learned that lesson early, before there were more zeros on the credit card statements. Imagine playing with a $40 billion economy. For politicians, debt is an addiction that can do a remarkable amount of damage in a very short period of time. And I get it. I get the rush. I get the high that comes from spending to do something good for people today, or to help you get wickedly popular. But government's responsibility is not only to make its current adult and senior population happy. Responsible government needs to consider those that are young, like my kids and your kids, and those not yet born, for it is they that will be carrying the burden of debt for quite some time. Debt is now also like a street drug. After the 2008 credit crisis, sparked really by the invention of the home equity loan, Canadians kept poking that little needle in their arms at a pace that will likely end up in overdose. In fact, the middle 60% of Canadians, our middle class, are on this path, and it isn't going to end well. Whoops. During the federal election campaign, I was surprised when the Liberal campaign focused so much on the middle class. I was surprised because compared to other OECD countries, our middle class vastly outperformed everyone else. But when I started studying the escalation of personal debts in this country and the fact that middle income wages have been relatively stagnant since 1995, only then did I start to realize that we have entered what I call the age of anxiety, where people and families are doing everything possible and they're still not able to make ends meet. The age of anxiety breeds a feeling of desperation, and when people are desperate, values tend to be compromised. What does it mean provincially and locally? Global growth is stalling, commodity prices are declining, unemployment is accelerating, middle-class wages are flattening, personal debt levels are peaking, tax rates are compounding, competitiveness is weakening, and return of capital is disappearing. I use return on capital for a reason. Because if there is no return on capital, if there is no return, there simply is no capital investment. And capital investment has been the fuel of the Alberta economy, and it's built this incredible economic engine that we've all benefited from. The key discussion topic today is not how we create a quick change in unemployment. The key discussion topic today is how do we create an environment that can generate a healthy return on capital. Because over the last 12 months, the return has been significantly deteriorated across all industries. It started with federal policy change on temporary foreign workers. We saw a personal income tax increase, corporate tax increase, municipal taxes, a phase one minimum wage increase, carbon taxes on emitters, carbon tax on consumption, electricity and heating costs have increased, new regulatory burdens, higher import costs on machinery, equipment, and food, a delayed royalty review, and a substantial amount of new provincial debt and new interest payments. No wonder our investment attractiveness has dropped to 38th position, which makes it extremely hard to compete for investment dollars against the province next door, ranked 8th. Brad Wall could not be happier. Now, I know EEDC is a publicly funded agency, so this year, as Board Chair Barry Travers mentioned, we did what most of you have already done. We worked with our board and the mayor and council, our executive team and staff, and we did a deep dive on our operations. And I'm proud to say that last month, we were the first city-owned agency or city branch in history to request not a 3, but a 2% budget decrease in order to keep your municipal taxes as low as possible. We did this because it was the right thing to do, and we hope to see others in the public service start to do the same. If you think I'm up here blaming our provincial government, you're wrong. I'm not. They inherited 10 years of drunken sailor euphoria that came after the Klein years, which was the last time we made hard decisions about size of government, debt repayment, and government program spending. We in this room did not do our job over the past 10 years of euphoria. We didn't hold government to account. Government spending increased at twice the rate of population growth plus inflation, which has created an unstable and unsustainable cost structure and a culture of dependence on program spending. We watched our net assets deteriorate, and we never once forced the discussion on a revenue framework that protected us from a downturn in energy prices. This is a lesson to all Albertans, that today we would be suffering the same consequences regardless of the party in power. But there is a party in power, and our new government now needs to manage this province with astuteness and precision, and they need your help. It doesn't matter what political ideology was campaigned on. Our government has a responsibility to steward this province forward for the best interests of Albertans and future Albertans. As I see it, they have a choice: to govern from ideology that risks temptation to follow Ontario into a financial vortex of despair, or to govern from the center and implement fiscal and economic policies that will require patience from their supporters, but achieves a balance between economic reforms and economic growth. That is what leadership is all about, and that's a requirement of the job. John F. Kennedy once said, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." One thing being a parent has taught me is that when you have responsibility for the next generation, you abandon your right to be reckless. Pursuing economic growth without economic reform was reckless for the last 10 years. Pursuing economic reform without economic growth would be equally as reckless in the years ahead. And it is critical that we get this balance right, or the consequences will simply echo generations. I started this address talking about my kids and our proud history in this province. I used words like rugged and resilient and hard work, determination, courage, triumph over hardship. Yet over the past 6 months, we have been made to feel ashamed of our history. The embarrassing cousin, the one that no one wants to talk about, an outlier amongst provinces. Well, let me let you in on a little secret. I always want my kids to be outliers. I never want them to be average. I never want this province to be average. I have no problem making incremental changes to economic and social policies, but if it's done in a way that undermines our history, our culture, and our identity, then I take great exception. Because being the freest, most entrepreneurial, least unionized, least subsidized, least regulated, hardest working provinces in Canada is what has made us successful. It is our brand, and it is our way of life, and remaining steadfast to those principles have consistently outperformed every other jurisdiction in Canada and North America. Now, we've had ups and downs before, and we will have ups and downs again. And this downturn will probably be harder than most because there's so much gravity against us. And some of you may be thinking about quitting, of leaving, moving somewhere else, paying taxes somewhere else. And I understand those feelings, but this is your province, your home, your history. We need to dig deep as a people, come together as a community, and never quit the fight because there is so much still to achieve. What I would like to lay out in front of you today are 5 areas of focus, each of which has a call to action for everyone in this room. These are not new areas of diversification, some rush to a new industry. No, these build on our strengths. where we know we can compete and we can succeed. The next 2 to 3 years, will require some tough slugging for everyone in this room: governments, institutions, business, families, and individuals. And they all need to do their part. But in 3 years, if we are united and do this properly, this city and province will emerge stronger than it's ever been in the past. The first is around entrepreneurship. The most important thing we can do is to continue to invest in talent. Every year, we commercialize 10,000 new products from our post-secondary institutions when they walk across the stage and into the marketplace. And we need you to hire them and keep hiring them. We need them to stay here. They are the innovators that bring the entrepreneurial spirit to your businesses, to our startups, to government departments or hospitals, and everywhere in between. Entrepreneurial thinkers also need collision spaces like Startup Edmonton and Tech Edmonton and the Edmonton Research Park. In fact, these facilities are near capacity, and in 2016, we're going to be looking for landlords in this room to bring more of these entrepreneurial spaces onto the market. 48% of our net new job growth comes from small companies, 0 to 10 employees, and this sector grows while others contract. Our entrepreneurial ecosystem in this city is working exceptionally well and is churning out high-growth companies like Jobber and Yardstick, Granify, Gilead, and BioWare that are all recruiting big numbers of people and driving wealth creation during this downturn. But there are still areas that are massively underdeveloped, and those are in the area of health innovation, specifically turning our $19 billion health delivery system into a health industry that benefits the local economy, agri-food, which is run provincially and not connected to our local ecosystem of networks, mentors, programs, and facilities and capital that support entrepreneurs, and a shared makerspace that allows creative people access to tools, trades, software, fabrication, and instruction to do rapid prototyping. We will be bringing each of these 3 strategies to market in the next year to continue to drive our entrepreneurial culture. And I encourage you all to think about how you can not sit back and wait for the downturn to pass, but actually use these facilities, programs, and bright minds. The second area is in export and trade. Wealth creation happens when money comes into our economy from outside to buy our goods and services. And Alberta-based companies need to continue to develop markets for their products and services outside of this jurisdiction. Our past federal government worked hard over the past decade to open 12 new countries under free trade agreements with which we have the opportunity to expand. Yet 85% of Alberta-based companies still generate 100% of their revenue from within our borders. For some reason, we're very silent on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which now needs your voice. The TPP countries generate about $50 billion from TPP countries, and that is despite an incredible number of tariffs, taxes, and restrictions. The TPP should be a priority for our province in discussions with the federal government, and although we are not an advocacy organization, I can certainly encourage our business community to develop their voice on this matter and let our politicians know that this is significant to our economy. And as well as TPP, CETA to access Europe is definitely, the federal government learned that one loud and clear last night. Pipelines also matter. Not only do they get our products most efficiently to market, but the construction of pipelines in Western Canada is good for local economies and local companies. Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline between Edmonton and Burnaby would generate 678,000 person-years of employment, $18.5 billion in revenue for federal and provincial governments, and $49.8 billion in after-tax profits, otherwise known as wealth creation, over the first 20 years of operation, the largest share happening and accruing here in Alberta. Export and trade are essential parts of the wealth creation formula. And to be stalled by analysis and indecision at this time just perpetuates the reason why investment continues to sit on the sidelines when it needs to get activated. Everyone in this room has a role in making these opportunities come to life. Sometimes it's taking the risk and exploring a new market, and sometimes it requires something very uncharacteristic and very un-Canadian of us, which is writing a letter of support or attending a town hall meeting or a round table to give MLAs and MPs the courage to make the right decision. Third area is around energy innovation. If Mark Twain was an Albertan, he would say, "The demise of the fossil fuel industry has been greatly exaggerated." This province has been blessed with an abundance of energy products like no other: oil, natural gas, coal. And their extraction and production have created billions of dollars of wealth, billions in dollars of government programs, and billions of dollars in research and development. And there are trillions of dollars available, trillion dollars and trillion barrels available if we're smart enough to create 5 things: carbon or CO2-free emissions, enhanced oil recovery, carbon capture and storage, clean coal technology, and the safest pipelines in the world. Now, I know utopia is a beautiful place, but I also know that we can compete and win globally in these areas. And if we're smart enough, our energy industry will return stronger and more vibrant than ever before, and it's not a time to turn our backs on that industry. Our energy industry is a platform for innovation. It always has and it always will be. These 5 challenges should be our innovation imperative and should be the focal point of about 50% of our research and innovation system. Our innovation goal should be to reduce the cost and extend the value of our energy sector. And the government should be putting incentives in place for businesses to massively increase their R&D spending and for entrepreneurs and innovators to collaborate on solutions. This is the logic behind the $20 million COSIA Carbon X Prize, and we should have many more of such grand challenges that build on versus run away from our competitive positions. The fourth area is in tourism, conferences, and major events. One of the bright lights of a 69.9% dollar is our tourism industry. And I'm forever thankful to Edmonton Destination Marketing Hotels for supporting our tourism division by building Edmonton's brand, investing in major events, promoting new flights, and attracting new conferences. Success on our major event strategy has been incredible, really, over the last 3 years. And it's now time to expand that to include major arts and cultural festivals and other events that we can be attracting to the city. We have new facilities and new hotels opening in the fall, which are a reason to celebrate, and also a huge opportunity for everyone in this room to invite people back to the city to see the Edmonton that now is. With Northlands needing to reinvent its future, we've been working constructively with Tim Reed and his team to end the 30-year discussion on how best to market the city under one banner, how we can stop competing against each other for conferences and conventions, and how we can create a permanent event site that allows for us to go after and win bigger and better productions. In the year ahead, even though we have a 71-cent dollar, we need your help. We need businesses to continue to support our major events through sponsorship, because those major events create a rhythm, an energy, and a pulse in this city that exudes confidence and creates a reason for everyone to be engaged. It attracts tourists, and it gives people amazing experiences through tough economic times. As well, many of you also sit on boards and agencies and belong to organizations that have annual conferences in fancy places like Atlanta or Washington. Well, it's time for those organizations and associations and delegates to experience Edmonton. So we're asking each of you to pause, dig deep, and think about how you can help our sales teams identify, qualify, and bid on conferences and conventions, and it's time to bring those back to the city of Edmonton. Very easy thing you can do. My last area of focus is a bit unconventional, but so important. I've talked about governments around the world getting bigger, more in debt, more bureaucratic. In this country, we have 3 levels of government with the risk of introducing a 4th at the regional level. There needs to be an intervention. There needs to be an intervention because we can barely afford the multi-tiered system that we have today, and we certainly cannot afford becoming more engorged. We are at a time of austerity, but also urgency, and we need to bear down and challenge our elected officials and bureaucrats to do their part. And by their part, I mean becoming more efficient, less bureaucratic, faster, simpler, and allowing those closest to the customer, the citizen, to deliver the services. It can be done, but it is about redefining leadership in the public service and our expectation of performance. And we should start in my own organization's backyard with economic development and innovation system. We have local agencies, regional agencies, provincial agencies, federal agencies, nonprofit agencies, crown corporations, all using taxpayer dollars to increase the flow of business people, investment, and commercialization in this province. But the level of duplication and inefficiencies is astonishing, with no overall leadership, coordination, and planning, or true accountability for results. If you're serious about performance, which I am, we should be making this topic a provincial imperative, with the leadership and courage to overhaul the whole economic development system, multi-tiered economic development system. It starts with redefining the role of government. The provincial level should be focused on policy, strategy, program selection, funding, and measurement, and that's it. And leave the doing to the local, as that local is where you're much more accountable and can deliver services more effectively. Today, I'm extending my hand and urging the various institutions in the Edmonton metro region, including the provincial government, to be guided by our provincial interest to shape the economic development and innovation system to what is needed in our future and leave behind the ineffective systems and structures of our past. We need to create a much better environment that encourages entrepreneurism and investment, and we need to do it now. I want my children to grow up in a prosperous Alberta like we all did. I don't want them to be part of the first generation of Albertans who are worse off than their parents. I want them to be part of a province that is not wasteful. I want them to be part of a province that works better together. 25 years ago, I had a professor of Alberta economic history that told me, over time, our province will create more wealth than anywhere else in North America, so long as we believe in two things: that the future will always generate more wealth than the present, and that every one of us has a personal and moral responsibility to make it so. In my 3 years at EEDC, we've turned this organization into a very well-functioning machine, and I'm proud of our board, our executive team, and our staff that have made that transition. But it would be negligent. It would be a disappointment if we couldn't take that passion and understanding of performance to the provincial and regional levels in an attempt to make the whole system much better. So in the end, these issues aren't so much political or economic, they're personal to all of us. I oversee a team of 700 people. That's 700 families, many of which are new young parents or new young Edmontonians or Canadians. Every month we get together for a town hall meeting that we call the Way Forward. We talk about our business, the economy, and life, and what we need to do to be better than ever before, and what we need to take personal responsibility for in the process. We operate with a set of values, 5 of them: public stewardship, selfless approach, lead the way, make an impact, and care about one another. Today, this is our town hall meeting, our way forward. We talked about the history and the values that have served this province well, and the desperate need to create an environment that heightens entrepreneurship and the attraction of capital investment. Today, we each have an individual responsibility to stop complaining, to increase our investment in innovation, to hire our graduates, to explore new revenue opportunities in new markets, to drive down costs, to support major events, and to attract new conferences, and to make the investment needed to prepare for when things turn. Let us join in a new determination to rebuild the foundation of this economy, to work together, to act responsibly. Let us do so with the most profound respect for ideological differences. But let us never forget that what we do today will forever impact future generations. I believe this province will regain the potential conceived on our flag. And it is out of this extended period of darkness that prosperous days will come. Thank you very much.